Hi everyone, this is Julianne Victoria of Through the Peacock's Eyes. Welcome to my channel. So in today's video, I'll be answering a couple of questions I got maybe 3 years ago, maybe more. It happens when you have a baby, about Western astrology. So I'll probably post this in my astrology playlist rather than the vlogs and discussion. So the first question is, why does my listening to my Western rising sign not mesh? Or why does my rising sign not mesh with my horoscopes? And then the second question is about different Western house systems. So for the second question, I'll change up the camera and I'll be showing charts on screen to show some of the common ways. And that will also explain why the rising sign does not mesh. But before I get to that, I want to answer the first of two questions I've sort of put together to sum this up. So this video is basically like tips on how to listen to your astrology horoscope in the Western tropical system. So the two questions I put together are how and what. So how to listen to them and what to listen to. Now for the how, people listen to the horoscopes. I occasionally still do this just out of curiosity to see, is something you want going to happen? And a friend of mine, actually the friend who first introduced me to Vedic astrology way back in like 2004, she would phrase it this way. People want to know, where's my money and where's my honey? So they want to know about money and relationship, or money and romance. You can listen to horoscopes for that. And as I mentioned, that is why a lot of people listen. Is that money gonna come in? Am I gonna win the lottery? But that's not really helpful. That's not helpful for your personal growth. That's not helpful for empowering yourself. So when you're listening to horoscopes, and this is specifically astrology, not tarot readings based on astrological signs, but when you're listening to astrological horoscopes, trying to find when things are going to happen for you, you give your power away. You're giving your power away to fate. You're totally setting aside your free will. Now, I always point this out in private client sessions, whether it's just astrology or a spiritual life coaching session, which can encompass astrology, oracle, tarot, coaching, all of the whole package, that there are always both positive and negative. Or there are always, the two sides of the duality. And free will comes into how the energies, how things play out in your life, how they go more one side to the other. Your choices shift the energies. Or you can also say it a little more clearly, your choices shift how the prevailing energies play out in your life. You can also view this sort of as using law of attraction. Using your intention, your thoughts, to allow to create the space for more positive or beneficial, auspicious things to happen versus not. Now, sometimes there are lessons we need to learn. And often those lessons come through things we don't necessarily wish for. But again, if we don't give our power away, and we realize we have free will in understanding how and why things happen so that we can learn and grow, we empower ourselves, and those what at first seem like negatives can become positives. Okay, so I wrote a couple notes here. Yes, so I wrote, it's better to listen to horoscopes as guidance rather than, am I going to meet the love of my life this week? Am I going to win the lottery this week? Am I going to get that raise? It's okay to listen for that. But if you continually give your power away to that and do nothing, make no choices, not express your free will, not put out your own intention and thoughts to attract what you want in your life, life will stagnate. Things will stagnate. So it's better to listen to them for guidance on lessons you need to learn. So for example, let's say you've had repeated patterns in relationships. You may listen to a horoscope or a few, and hear the answer of what you need to do to change within yourself to attract a healthier relationship. Now that's really simplifying it, because these can be, long-term processes, deep inner processes. But to help you in that process, listen to horoscopes for guidance. So in my notes, I put down guidance of the strong energies at this moment in time. And astrology is the study of time. We tell time by the moon and the sun and the stars. So yes, there are times when you are more likely to meet your life partner. There are times where you're most likely to feel like people and friends are separating out from you. And those are times where you need that space for yourself. There are times where, the energies and the planets align where you're likely to bring in more income, make more money, or more money coming into your life. But you still play a role in all of that. Okay. So listen to horoscopes as guidance to understand, to know what the strong energies are at this moment in time, so you can make better choices, so you can become aware of karmic lessons you need to learn that you just may not have been aware of or have been ignoring, and for focus on your own personal growth and deep healing. Okay, so when you do that, listen for the common denominators, especially if you're listening to like several different horoscopes, you have your certain astrologers that you resonate with, or you just randomly, listen to a few different ones. Listen for the common denominators for you. You may notice a common denominator that someone else doesn't hear who's the same sign. So a common denominator may be you hear, this is a good week or month to do some cleaning out of your home or your space. And you catch that. You catch that message in several of the readings you listen to, or a majority of them. That would be a message for you. And you may have a friend, same sign, listening to all the same horoscopes, who may not hear that at all. And he or she gets a different message. So listen for the common denominators. Words that repeat, phrases that repeat, whatever catches your attention, but also common feelings that are evoked within you when you listen to them. Okay, so that's the tip on how to listen to your horoscopes. So now I'll switch the camera up and talk about what sign or what chart, should you listen to your ascendant sign, your sun sign, what to listen to for the best guidance. Okay, so let's look at a few different types of Western astrology house systems to answer that question, and look into more of the question I came up with as to what to listen to, as well as the question that was given to me a few years ago is, why does my Western rising sign not mesh with my horoscope? And I think the person meant, why does it not mesh with what's going on in my life? So when you're listening to your Western astrology horoscope, I would suggest listen to both your sun and your rising sign. So first of all, your sun sign represents your individual soul, the eternal part of you that goes from one lifetime to the next, that lives on after your physical form is gone. Your ascendant sign or your rising sign is you, the individual form, the physical body mind, so the brain, the body mind, the ego in this lifetime. And most people are living their lives both as, very much enmeshed in the physical material world, in their physical form, in who they are, the personality that they are in this lifetime, and are on a spiritual path and feel their soul and live from their soul. How much of each for each person, that's different. There are a few people who live at the extremes. There are some, like a Buddhist monk, I would say, is living solely from the soul level, or predominantly, we'll say. And there are some very, very materialistic people who are fully enmeshed in the physical form. But for the most part, for the majority of us, I would say listen to both, because our lives are both. They're both physical, material, and spiritual. Okay. Now, when you listen to your sun sign horoscope, astrologers have to then assume that your sun, the sign that your sun is in, will be your first house. So in a natal chart, the first house is determined by the ascendant. But you can see my sun is up here in Leo in my 8th house. But if I listen to a horoscope, or if I made a horoscope for Leo, I have to assume that Leo is the first house. So the transits that I'm talking about in the horoscope, in the astrological horoscope, are dependent on that. So let's say, for example, so right now we have Jupiter transiting Scorpio. Jupiter is it's not shown here, but Jupiter is 4 houses away from my sun, so charts are read counterclockwise. I would have to read that as Jupiter transiting my 4th house. And that may be accurate on one level because of my sun sign. However, in the natal chart, Jupiter transiting Scorpio could either be in my 10th or 11th house, depending on the degrees. So sun sign will resonate to some degree, but listening to the ascendant or rising horoscope will give you more information, and especially more practical information. So as I mentioned, your ascendant or rising sign is, well, it's the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at your moment of birth, and it represents, because it's your moment of birth, you, the physical being in this lifetime. Now, if your ascendant, like mine, which is at 23 degrees of Sagittarius, is in the later degrees of a sign, and you listen to a horoscope for Sagittarius, it may be off by a house. So for example, right now Saturn is transiting Capricorn. And I actually do explain this in my Saturn and Capricorn transit video for all the astrological signs, and I'll link that on screen at the end if you want to check that out. If I were to listen to a Sagittarius horoscope, the astrologer must, because they cannot predict the layout of the houses for a 12th of 7 billion people in the world. It must be done by whole house. The astrologer must assume that Saturn transiting Capricorn is your 2nd house if your ascendant is in Sagittarius. Because they can't do charts for all the degrees and all the possible house sizes. It's not possible. It must be done. A general horoscope must be done by whole house sign. Now, if your ascendant, let's say, was at 5 degrees of Sagittarius, it's very likely that everything's going to lay out in a general horoscope perfectly for you, for the most part, of course, depending on your house layout. So if you have your chart, or you've had your chart done, or you pull up your chart on a free online Western astrology calculator, and you do need to know your birth time or have a pretty good idea of it, you can see where your ascendant lies in your chart. So for me, for example, I did this experiment probably about 13 years ago when I was really diving into studying astrology and starting to doing readings for other people. I experimented because I never felt like listening to Sagittarius horoscopes resonated. I started listening to Capricorn because nearly all of Capricorn is in my 1st house. And it started making sense, and I realized it's because to do general readings, you must go by whole house sign. Astrologers can't do anything else in a personal reading. Yes, the astrologer can look at the transits for your individual chart, but when you're listening to general horoscopes, it's just not possible. It has to be done by whole house sign. So I hope I'm making sense here. So that is why listening to your Western rising sign may not often mesh. Sometimes it may, depending on the placements, where the transits are, the degrees they are, and how that relates to your ascendant. But often it cannot, because the house sizes are different and everyone's chart is different. Okay, I hope that answers that question. And that's giving, my what to listen to tip for listening to general horoscopes. So your sun sign and your ascendant or rising sign, depending on the degree. Or you can experiment like me. If, say, your 1st house is like most, some houses can have a little bit of 3 different signs in it. But if you look at your chart and let's say your ascendant is Sagittarius and your 1st house goes to, let's say, 10 degrees of Aquarius, you have an enormous 1st house. Listen to Capricorn. Or let's say your ascendant is at 10 degrees of Taurus, and let's say all of this is your 1st house. and you have your first house is half Taurus, half Gemini. Listen to both Taurus and Gemini and see what happens. Because again, like, it depends on where the transits are and how they're in relation to that sign in that house. Okay. And of course, getting a personal reading is going to be the most accurate, because that's the only way an astrologer can know exactly where the transits are affecting your chart, your houses, your planets. Okay, so just to look at a couple of other house systems. So again, this is Placidus. By far, I would say this is what I've seen 95% of the time. Sometimes it looks different. There's different fonts and the degrees are listed out here, but you know, there may be different styles of Placidus, but this is by far, again, I would say like 95% of the time, this is the type of chart I have seen. Now, another way to do a Western astrology chart is with whole signs. And that's where this is the equal house is what I'll get to next, but whole signs. Whole signs is how Vedic astrology is done. And that's the only way I've seen Vedic astrology done, though I've heard there are some other ways that it's done. But for the most part, it's whole signs and totally makes sense in Vedic astrology for me. But in Western astrology with the tropical system, it does not. But some people do use this in Western. Whole signs is where, you know, your ascendant, let's say, is in Sagittarius. But then your first house will be all of Sagittarius. Second house will be Capricorn. Third house will be Aquarius, and so on. And the third system is equal house. And that's where all the houses are all 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees. So they're all the same size, equal size houses. This is probably the second most common house system I've seen. But again, whoever asked me that question like 3 years ago, Placidus is by far the most common. So this will change the layout of the houses, but nothing else changes in your natal chart. The planets are always where the planets are when you're born. The ascendant is always the ascendant when you are born. It's just the house size can shift a bit. So, but again, Placidus is what you'll most likely see out there. Okay, so I hope this video brought some clarity for some people, some understanding on how to listen to astrology, listen to your general horoscopes for guidance for personal growth rather than just tell you what's going to happen in your life and, you know, sort of giving your power away to fate. You can empower yourself with astrology, work with the dominant energies to learn, to grow, and that process then itself attracts in what you want in your life. All right, thank you very much for tuning in, stopping by, liking, sharing, and subscribing. And if you're interested in a personal reading, just go to my website, juliannevictoriacoaching.com, and I hope to see you back here soon.